Whew, y'all sounded good today. I appreciate being able to worship with you like this. And we're going to jump right into our lesson this morning. As Tom said a few minutes ago, we're starting a new series today, and we're calling it Haunted. It's that time of year when lots of folks think about spooky stuff. At the end of this month, we have Halloween coming up, and that may be, I know there's some people in this room, that's one of your favorite holidays. You like, dressing up in different things. You like decorating the house. Who doesn't like candy, right? I mean, it's just one of the best holidays that's out there. And so maybe you really like the trick-or-treating or taking your kids trick-or-treating. There may be some of you that still dress up and take a bucket with you around. I won't make any judgments on you. Costumes, we like, finding the costumes. My family, at different times, we have all had, at least when our kids were younger, we all had a certain theme. We would, dress up together as different things. The best was probably the year that we all went as like an entire Star Wars family, and this is when my youngest was really little, and we had a Yoda mask, and he had the robe on and his lightsaber, and the kids would run through the house in their costumes, with lightsaber wars and stuff, and we'd be watching TV or doing something, and literally it looked like Yoda was running by. He was just that size. It was awesome. Some of you get really into like decorating your house and decorating your yard and those kinds of things. I mean, it's that time of year where we think about scary things and spooky things, and the movie It that's out right now. I mean, people are just going crazy about that, right? When it comes to haunted houses, when it comes to scary movies, not my favorite. Okay? At least for haunted houses and things like that, I like being on the other side. I like being the one doing the scaring, not the one being scared, right? When I was a teenager at my school, the class that I was in, for 2 years in a row, we were in charge of running the haunted house for our fall festival that we did. And I had a lot of fun, scaring small children. It was great. And that carried over into my youth ministry days. And we would have... we had a tradition in the youth group that I was with of having a Halloween lock-in. And every year, somewhere close to Halloween, we would have a lock-in. And there would be other stuff. We'd go bowling and riding go-karts. But before that, we went out. There's a church member that had some property, and we would go out and do a hayride. And he had this huge cow pasture. In one section of it, he had a whole bunch of just grown-up, trees and brush and stuff, and we call that the haunted forest. And me and some other friends of mine would plan a trail through that whole thing. We had places where we'd lead the kids through, and people would jump out at them. It was one of the funnest times of my life, honestly. It's just freaking some kids out and some adults too. And I've got really good stories about that I could take up the whole sermon time today talking about, but I won't. All right. I like being on that side of it. I don't like being the one who's being haunted. I don't like going through haunted houses. I'm not a big fan of scary movies. I can be scared of a lot of different things besides like even just Halloween related things. I mean, there are things that can get me. My boys still, I got 3 boys, and they still all enjoy hiding behind the corner as they hear me coming down the hall and jumping out and scaring me, really funny. Not as much fun anymore as it used to be. When I'm out at Green Valley Bible Camp and I'm walking down the trails at night and I don't have a flashlight, I can freak myself out pretty quickly, all right? I mean, I'm really brave around the campers, like, you'll be fine. Inside, I'm going, we're all going to die, I can be haunted by a lot of different things. There's haunted places around here. I mean, there's a hotel in Eureka Springs that's supposed to be haunted. You can even take a ghost tour of it. Maybe you get to see the apparition that supposedly lives there. If you go out to the battlefield out at Pea Ridge, there are those who say that they've seen ghosts or spooky things out there at the battlefield. You can also be haunted by things that aren't necessarily scary. I'm haunted still from a basketball game my junior year of high school. That was a long time ago, but I still remember it. We were in a tournament during Christmas break, and we were playing the undefeated team in our conference, and we had them beat. We had a 4-point lead with 2 minutes left, and we blew it, and we lost by 2 points. And in the final minute, I personally missed 4 free throws. That's not funny, Reagan. Why are you laughing? Supposed to support our Christian brothers, not laugh at their pain. I'm still haunted by it. I still remember it. I remember almost everything about that game. We can be haunted by, well, I'm haunted by words that I've said that hurt people's feelings. And maybe even if I've gone back and apologized for it, I know that still our relationship was never the same. I'm haunted by the fact that the first youth ministry internship that I did, I was 19 years old, and they put me in charge of a youth group. And I took a bunch of kids over to another youth group member's house that we knew were out of town, and we shoe polished all their cars. Well, I knew how to do that without damaging any property, but the kids I was with didn't, and we messed up some stuff. And that family, they didn't come to youth group stuff the rest of the summer. I'm still haunted by that. That was years ago. Maybe you can start thinking of stuff in your own past that you're haunted by. And it's not scary, but it's the memories of those things. It's the emotions that are attached to them that can still bother you. And that's what we're talking about. I mean, the definition of something that's haunted, I mean, I know that we think of scary stuff and spooky stuff, but to be haunted means to be visited by something habitually, or to have something recur persistently, or to frequently be in the company of something or someone. I'm haunted by the memory of this. I'm haunted by this experience. We can be haunted by a lot of different things, and those memories of those things, those actions, those events can affect us personally, can affect our hearts, it can affect our relationships, and it can affect our faith. And that's what we're going to be talking about this month. For the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about the struggles that we have, the struggles that keep coming back again and again. The things that we wish would go away, the things that we wish that we didn't have to deal with anymore, and they keep seeming to find their way back into our hearts and into our lives. And that's what we want to talk about. And we're going to talk about lots of different things that haunt us. And we're going to talk about, regrets. We're going to talk about being haunted by choices that we didn't make, opportunities that we had and we didn't take those opportunities. We're going to talk about being haunted by our doubts, by the things that cause us to wonder, is God real? And is this faith really something to hold on to? And the things that challenge us to let go of that faith. And we're going to be talking this morning specifically about being haunted by our past mistakes. Being haunted by the things from our past, and specifically the things that we have done. When we talk about, regrets, when we talk about hurts, when we talk about feelings about somebody else, sometimes those things that bother us from our past are things that were done to us or said to us or we had no control over. And I want to make sure that we're making a distinction this morning of just the things that we had a choice. We had the opportunity to do something, to do the right thing, and we chose something else. I'll put it that way. That we had the opportunity to do something beneficial, to do something that would be a blessing to our families or to people maybe that we don't know, and we did the exact opposite. We're actually hurtful to somebody else. Might have even done some things that hurt ourselves. And there's all sorts of things, there are all sorts of situations that we can look at, the past mistakes that we can look at and how those things are still affecting us today. We can look at circumstances in our marriages. We can look at times where we said hurtful things to our spouse. We said hurtful things about our spouse to somebody else. Maybe they were sitting right there and we thought it was funny and it wasn't. We can think of times when we've just blamed our spouse for things that weren't even their fault. When we've held grudges. Maybe some of us in this room know the times when we've been unfaithful to our spouse. Where there's been an actual physical sexual affair, where there's been just an emotional affair. I've allowed myself to become closer to this other person than to my own spouse. Maybe we've dabbled in pornography and been unfaithful to our spouses that way. Maybe we can look at times where we could have used the opportunity to connect with and build our relationship and our connection, our love with our spouse. Instead, we couldn't put down the remote to the TV. We couldn't put our phones down. We're binge watching Netflix right now, you know? I've got to see this next episode. And it had an effect on our marriage. We can look at past mistakes, you know, both parents and kids. I can think of times growing up in the house that I grew up in and hateful things that I said to my parents and things that I knew were hurting them that I would do just because I wanted to. And I regret those things. Sometimes I think about those things and it still bothers me. I still struggle with it. And parents, you can think of times when you've yelled at your kids when they didn't need to be yelled at. When you've been overly critical of them. When you've disrespected them because they were disrespecting you. You can think of times when you didn't spend the time with your kids that you had the opportunity to. Maybe some in this room have been the victims of abuse. And the struggle with that still continues to bother them nowadays. And maybe some of us in this room were the abusers. And we're not doing that anymore. Those aren't the actions that we're taking anymore, but the guilt that we feel from those things still bothers us. Maybe we look at our past mistakes in the way that we've handled our finances. We've overspent. We spent well beyond our means when it comes to our houses or our cars or just stuff that we can't afford. Maybe we look at times we got ourselves into debt and deeper into debt, and we got ourselves in more debt trying to pay off that debt. We've neglected to pay bills. We neglected to model for our families and our children what it's like to be good stewards of what God has given us. Maybe we just made bad financial decisions. We invested in something that just tanked, and we lost a bunch of our savings. And we regret it, and it still bothers us. Maybe there's actual habits, actual addictions that some of us have dealt with, have been set free from, or are still working to get free from. We struggle with alcohol. We struggle with illegal drugs. We struggle with prescription meds. We've struggled with pornography. We've dealt with and continue to deal with losing our temper and just lashing out in anger. We're holding on to this. We have this habit of just being resentful, of being bitter about things that happened in the past. And we choose to hold on to it. Maybe there's past mistakes with our friendships. We broke somebody's trust. We told something that they asked us to never tell. We lied to them. We insulted them. We yelled at them when they didn't deserve it. I'm just giving you just kind of a grocery list of different things that all of us can look at and go, man, that still does bother me. That one right there. Those two or three that you just mentioned, that guilt, that remorse, it still hangs over me. And that's what I want us to hit on. That's what I want us to focus on this morning, is just even some of the consequences to the choices that we made days, weeks, years ago can still be affecting us nowadays. And even if we've apologized for things we've done, and even if we try to make up for them, and even if we try to make things better, one of Satan's most powerful tools is guilt. And making us continually feel bad for stuff that we've been forgiven for. We're haunted by our past. We're haunted by the mistakes that we made. You may be sitting there this morning going, I'm good. I recognize my freedom in Christ. I'm not perfect, but I recognize that I'm set free from past mistakes and past sins, and I'm not haunted by those things. And if that's where you're at, man, that's awesome. Praise God for it. I'd imagine there's many of you in this room going, I know I've been set free. I know I've given my life to Jesus, and I know I've been set free from my sin, and yet I can't get past the guilt. I can't get past the emotions attached to it. I can't get past those feelings. They keep coming back. What do we do? How do we deal with that? How do we allow Jesus to free us, not just from the mistake that we made, but the haunting that comes from it? Let me give you a few steps very quickly this morning. how to not be haunted by our past mistakes. First thing we need to do is define it. And what I mean by that is define exactly what the mistake was. Whatever it is, whatever the mistake was, whatever the choice and the action was, whatever's causing the recurrence of guilt, I need to make sure I know exactly what it is that's causing it. Sometimes I'm struggling with just being in a bad mood or feeling guilty or frustrated about something. And part of the reason that I continually feel that way is because I haven't paid attention to what the source of the problem is. And so if I'm going to deal with the guilt of a past mistake, if I'm going to deal with the struggle that continues to come from a past mistake, I need to make sure to acknowledge exactly what the past mistake was. I need to recognize, first of all, that I made a mistake. I need to acknowledge that. That may take a little bit of humility. That may take a little bit of putting my pride aside and going, yeah, I messed up. And acknowledging that. And then the second thing is I need to be honest and acknowledge that it's still affecting me. That it's affecting the way I work, and it's affecting my friendships, and it's affecting my family and my marriage. It's affecting just my whole attitude and demeanor, because I'm allowing the struggle to continue to come up to the front, continue to haunt me, continue to bother me. And I may need help in defining that. I may need to go to a counselor and help me work through some of that. I may need to talk to a friend, somebody that I trust, and go, help me with this. Help me understand why it is that this continues to be a struggle for me. I need to be honest with my spouse about it and how it's affecting me and how it may be affecting us. I need to define where it was that I messed up. I need to define where it was that the bad choice, the bad decision was made, and acknowledge it was a mistake. Solomon says in Proverbs chapter 28, verse 13, whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy. Whatever it is or was, I may be trying to hide it from other people. I may not want anybody to know what that thing was that I did, what those words were that I said. I may be trying to hide it from myself. And if I don't talk about it and I pretend that it's not there, then it's almost like it didn't happen. It doesn't work that way. I can continue to be haunted by the decision I made, even if I try not to talk about it and pretend that it's not there. Solomon says you need to confess it and renounce it. I need to be honest about it. If I'm going to move past this mistake and try to keep it from continually haunting me, I need to define what it is that's causing the problem in the first place. And the second thing is, I need to make sure to stop it. I need to make sure to stop that action. I need to make sure to stop making that choice, that decision. Sometimes the reason I'm continually haunted by my past choices is because I keep making the same choices. It's not really past. When that situation comes again, I still continue to do that. When the opportunity comes for me to lose my temper, I still lose my temper. When the opportunity comes for me to insult, I still insult. And I feel bad about it, and I feel remorseful, and I ask for forgiveness, and I still go back to it. And so maybe part of the reason that I'm being haunted by a past mistake, a past choice, a past course of action is because I'm still doing the same thing. So what do? Paul gets real blunt. I shared this verse actually a few weeks ago when we were talking about our marriages. But Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 34, come back to your senses, get your mind where it's supposed to be, and stop sinning. Real simple. Easier said than done, I agree. But Paul's not pulling any punches here. He's saying if there's something that you're doing that's wrong, if there's something that you're doing that's sinful, if there's something that you're doing that's hurting yourself or other people, stop it. Quit doing it. Make a different choice. Recognize what the problem is and stop doing it. Stop. Turn off the computer. Put your phone down. Stop with the insults. Stop spending more money on things when you don't have the money. Let go of the addiction. Walk away from the group of people that are gossiping. Bite your tongue when those words come. They're right there. I'm about to say it. Don't do it. Stop the action. Paul says whatever it is, whatever the problem is, even if it's from your past and doesn't happen all the time, when the opportunity comes, don't do it anymore. Know what the mistake is and stop making the mistake. Number 3, apologize for it. I'll date myself a little bit here. One of my favorite shows growing up was Happy Days. Anybody else? Anybody like the show Happy Days? Thank you. You ever hear the show Happy Days? There's a character on there, Arthur Fonzarelli, better known as the Fonz. That's right. Wore a leather jacket, thumbs up all the time. Everything was cool. And the Fonz almost never made a mistake. Almost always did everything right. Right? But there were a couple of times, there were a couple of episodes, and I would have to probably watch every episode to find it. But I remember there were a couple of times where the Fonz had made a mistake and had to make up for it, and he had to apologize for it. Do you remember how big a struggle that was for the Fonz with a leather jacket, with just coolness all over him, going, I'm zzz. You remember that? I'm zzz. Trying to get the words out, I'm sorry. You know what? I sympathize with the Fonz. Because sometimes it's hard for me to apologize. Even if I recognize sometimes I'm the one at fault, it takes humility. It takes some vulnerability to apologize, to acknowledge that I made a mistake and apologize for it. And if I've done something to hurt somebody else, if I've done something to be mean to somebody else or affect somebody else in some negative way, I need to be willing to step forward and go, man, I did that, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for how you feel because of that. I'm sorry for what I did to you. I apologize. Sometimes the mistake affects me. It doesn't necessarily affect anybody else. If I've done something hurtful to myself, whether it's an addiction or an attitude or something that I'm holding on to, and I need to, if this makes sense, I need to apologize. I need to look at myself in the mirror and go, I'm sorry that I'm doing this, and I want to stop. I don't want this to affect me anymore. I don't want to give in to this temptation anymore. And I acknowledge how big of a problem it is. Folks, the point that I'm making here this morning is sometimes we can't get beyond our past mistakes. They keep coming back to haunt us because we've never done anything to make amends for them. We've never apologized for those things. We've never been humble enough and vulnerable enough to go, you know what? I made a mistake. Can you forgive me? God, can you forgive me? Look at my spouse in the eye and saying, I am so sorry. Look at my kids in the eye and go, I messed up. I love you. Can you forgive me? If we could learn to do that on a more regular basis, we wouldn't be haunted nearly as much by the mistakes that we make. We have to get in a greater habit of saying, I'm sorry. Jesus even acknowledged this in Matthew chapter 5. He says, when you're offering your gift at the altar, and basically describing worship services in the culture that he was in, and basically saying if you're at church and you're worshiping and you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them and then come and offer your gift. It would be the same thing. If you've been here this morning and before we take communion, as we're singing the first song, you remember, you know what? I did something to her and that was the wrong thing to do. I need to go and take care of that. And you leave right then and take care of it. Because the point that Jesus is making is, if you don't take care of it, if you don't apologize for it, if you don't reconcile and get beyond it, it's going to affect the way you worship. It's going to affect your faith. It's going to affect your relationships. It's going to bleed into other parts of your life. So get it done and get it taken care of. Apologize for it and move past it. And I want you to notice that he specifically says, if you realize that your brother or sister has something against you, you're the one at fault, not them. You're the one that messed up. You need to take the first step in apologizing and getting it reconciled. Be the bigger person. Go fix it so you can move past it and not be haunted by it anymore. If we want to keep our past mistakes from haunting us, we need to learn and be in a better habit of apologizing and reconciling and learning to say, I'm sorry. we also need to let Jesus free us from it. Whatever the mistake was, we need to let Jesus free us from it. That's why he came. That's what he came to this earth to do. In John chapter 8 and verse 34, Jesus is talking to a group of people. And he says, very truly I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. That when I choose to do something ungodly, when I choose to do something that God doesn't want me to do, that thing becomes my master. I have given into that impulse. I have given into that desire. I have given into that action, and now it owns my heart. The action itself, the consequences from it, and the guilt that comes from it, all enslave me. My mistake can rule over me. It can control me. The guilt and the remorse and the frustration that I feel because of what I did can continue to affect me. And it affects me at my job and how I talk to my fellow employees. And it affects how I deal with my kids. And it affects my relationship with my spouse. This guilt and this remorse enslaves every part of me. And Jesus says, it was your choice. You chose to do something God didn't want you to do. And because of that, you became enslaved to it. But I can set you free. And he goes on, if you skip down a couple of verses to verse 36, he says, when the Son, talking about himself, when the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. You will be free, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. There is no doubt to your freedom. You don't have to wonder, I'm wondering if I still have to deal with that sin, that choice that I made. No, it's gone. You've been set free from it. You were enslaved to it, and now you've been set free from it. My Lord can cleanse our hearts, our minds, our souls. He completely forgives. There's no hint of it anymore before God. He completely washes away my sin and my mistakes and my guilt, and I need to allow him to do it. I need to give it to him. I need to give him my past mistakes. I need to say, Jesus Christ, please forgive me and wash me clean and take this away from me, and trust that he can and will and wants to. He wants to set us free. It's what he came for. And lastly, when we let him free us from it, we don't need to let the past mistakes define us anymore. We need to define what the mistake is. We need to acknowledge that the mistake was made. We need to apologize for it, and we need to allow Jesus to free us from it. But we don't need to let that past mistake define who we are now. In Galatians chapter 5 and verse 1, this is one of those verses, I've got it underlined in different Bibles that I have. This is one of those verses that I rely on a regular basis. If you got a Bible, I encourage you, underline it right now. And if you got something on your Bible app where you can make a distinction about this verse, please do. But in Galatians chapter 5 and verse 1, Paul says, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Jesus Christ set you free from sin so that you would be free from sin. And I know that sounds simplistic, but folks, that's powerful. The whole reason that Jesus came to this earth was to free you from your dumb mistakes of the past. And he had the power to do it. And he did it at the cross. It's why he came. But look at what Paul says after that. Stand firm then, and don't let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. Don't take on the burden that he's set you free from. Don't pick it back up again. If he's forgiven the sin and taken away the guilt, don't pile the guilt back on. Don't choose to continue to live under the control of guilt and sin when you've been given freedom. Paul is basically saying you were enslaved to sin, but you're not anymore. So live in this new life. Don't be that old person anymore, and don't live like that old person anymore. You were under the control of sin, but you are now under the control of grace. You were guilty, now you're blameless. You were enslaved to your past, but now you're set free from it. Don't let your past mistakes dictate your current actions. You've been set free. So live like it. That's how we keep from being haunted by it. We don't allow it to haunt us anymore. We don't allow it to have control anymore. We've been set free from it. And we choose to live in that freedom. Very quickly, as we close. There's a story in the Old Testament, the very first book of the Bible, in Genesis. There's a story told there about a man named Jacob. And Jacob, the first part of his life, he made a lot of mistakes. And I say he made a lot of mistakes that actually benefited him, but Jacob was basically the first con man that we read about in Scripture. His name in Hebrew literally means heel grabber. So you remember when you were in school and somebody would be walking between the desks and you stick your foot out and trip them? That was Jacob. That's what his name means, someone who trips somebody else. Jacob was a professional liar and con man and thought only of himself. And was given some success, achieved some success because of it. But he also had this connection with God, and you can see through Jacob's life as he's struggling through this, trying to be this person that God was shaping him into, and still holding on to this other life, still struggling through this conniving, this lying part of him. And it continued to haunt him. It continued to be a struggle for him. And he comes later on, years later in his life, and he's about to meet his brother, who he swindled out of a whole bunch of stuff for the first time in years. And he's afraid of what's going to happen. And the night before he's going to meet his brother, he's standing beside this river, and this man is standing there, who we find out is an angel of God. And Jacob, for whatever reason, I don't know why. I never have been able to totally figure out why. But Jacob has a wrestling match with this man. I don't wrestle random strangers on riverbanks, but he did. And they wrestle until the sun's coming up. And he's got him pinned. He's got him held. And the guy's like, let me go. And Jacob says, not until you change my name. And he changes his name to Israel. And his descendants become the nation of Israel. And I shared that story with you this morning because I want you to see this one piece of that story that's important to what we're talking about today. Jacob wanted desperately not to be known as Jacob anymore. Jacob didn't want to be known as the liar, the swindler, the guy that can't be trusted. And he's talking to this angel. He's talking to God through this messenger of God and saying, God, I don't want to be this guy anymore. I want a new name. I want a new identity. I want to be somebody else. The past is past. I can't change the past, but I don't want to live there anymore. I want to be something new. And God changed his name. And God will do the same for you. And whatever past mistakes you have that you allow to label you, that you allow to be your name, that you allow to be the things that you think of when you think of yourself, or that you assume other people think about you, my God has the power to change that and to give you a new identity as a child of his, as a forgiven, guiltless, beautiful child of God. And it can happen today. It can happen this morning. We're going to stand here in just a moment. We're going to sing a song together. And as we're singing that song, if you have never become a child of God, if you have never confessed your sins and repented of them and been baptized in the blood of Jesus Christ, today's the day that you can make that happen. Because when you do, my God will wash away all the past mistakes, completely remove them, and he'll forget about them. Even if we struggle to let go of them, he'll let go of them. And he'll set you free from them. And no longer will you be known by loses his temper. No longer will you be known by addicted to porn. No longer will you be known by hopeless gossip. You will be known as daughter of the King. You will be known as son of the King, child of God. It can happen today. And if you used to have that connection and you've walked away from it, you've taken the guilt and the remorse and the sin back on. And you're living under those labels that you wish desperately you didn't have anymore, my God will remove them today if you want him to. And we invite you to come forward while we're singing this song and say, I'm done living under this other identity that I don't like anymore. I'm sorry for my mistakes and I want to be something new. And we will pray for that to happen and believe with all of our hearts that God will make it happen today. Folks, don't leave here this morning with the same guilt that you walked in the door with. Change your label. Change your name. Change your life today. We can help make it happen. If you'll let us, while together we stand and sing. I will never be the same.